Today I am in Canal Park in Delphi, Indiana. Behind me you can see remnants of the old Wabash and Erie Canal. Now, this canal connected the Great Lakes to the Ohio River in Evansville, Indiana. It was a collection of four different canals, and collectively they were known as the Wabash and Erie Canal. Uh, This was the largest canal built in North America, and it stretched over 460 miles. The canal was dug with hand tools, wheelbarrows, pickaxes, shovels. All of the work was done manually. What we're looking at here are a couple of worker cabins. These are cabins that the workers building the canal would live in. Generally, a company would bid on construction of a mile of the canal, and the bid would go to the lowest bidder. So you might have two different companies working on consecutive sections of the canal. Some cabins were larger than others, depending on if you were married, single, and your position. Average rates of pay for the workers were $10 to $13 a month. Now that rate of pay was when the canal started in the early 1830s. As time progressed, in the 1840s, pay would average around $18 to $20 a month. What we're looking at here is a guard lock. This was unlike a lift lock in that it only had one set of doors. And these doors were opened and closed to help with flood control. In times of high flow, they would be closed to prevent erosion of the bank. Canal specifications were that the lock was 40 feet wide and 4 feet deep. The lift locks and guard locks, on the other hand, were 15 feet wide and 90 feet long. Here we're looking at a guard lock on the Wabash and Erie Canal. You can see one of the gates on the far side and the post to the near gate here. These wooden beams would be lifted, pushed down at the far end, and it would release the gate, and you could then bring it around and hook it over here. This would close the lock easily and help control water flow. Land for the Wabash and Erie Canal was given a land grant by Congress in 1827. 5 years later, in 1832, ground was broken for the first section. Traffic on the canal was powered by mule, the occasional horse. On the left here you can see the tow path. This is where the mules would pull the boats up and down the canal. Traffic traveled at about 3 miles an hour, with mule teams being switched out every 10 miles or so. So operations on the canal began in the summer of 1843, and about a decade later it was realized that the canal was not economically viable. This was for a number of reasons, one of which is that the canal banks would erode even with the boats traveling at a slow speed. And part of that was because they were weakened by local creatures such as the muskrat and crawdads. They'd burrow into the bank and weaken it, and that would cause the canal wall to erode into the canal, which would then require dredging. And the last canal boat went through Huntington, Indiana in 1874. Other sections of the canal were shut down earlier, and by 1887 all operations on the canal had ended. And that happened when residents of Paulding, Ohio, cut a dike, and they were trying to drain a reservoir. Well, various things happened to parts of the canal after it shut down. The part through Fort Wayne was purchased by the New York, Chicago, and Lake Erie Railroad, also known as the Nickel Plate Road, and this allowed them to run their rails through the city without having to worry about easements or purchasing property. The area between Napoleon and Toledo was paved over and became US 24. During the construction of I-469 in the area of US 24, the only intact wooden lock remaining was discovered. This was known as the Gronauer lock, and it was removed, and part of it is now in the Indiana State Museum. Although only sections of the canal remain open today, it was an important part of our history. Without the canals, large quantities of goods would not have been able to have been transported easily to areas such as Delphi. We have to remember that when these canals were built, roads were in their infancy. There was no motorized travel. This was before steam trains, so the only reliable transportation was by water. So although it did not last long, this canal served an important function as it connected the Great Lakes to the Ohio River. Canals helped create a reliable waterway. They could maintain the water level. They could avoid obstacles like rapids. And these were an important function in our nation's history. Thanks for joining me.